For 10,000 years, humanity had slept. Not because they wanted to, but because the galaxy had made a decision for them. Long ago, humans had reached a level of power no other species could match. They had explored every corner of their star system, built vast machines that could move planets, and even glimpsed the edges of the universe. Other civilizations had feared them, and in their fear, they had convinced themselves that humans had to be stopped. They did not destroy them, but they did something they thought was safer. They put humanity into a deep sleep at first. Humans had resisted, but the power of the galaxy's combined fleets was overwhelming. One by one, humans were gathered into stasis chambers, enormous structures floating in space, perfectly preserved. The galaxy gave careful orders. The humans were to be left untouched, a living warning of what could happen if power grew unchecked. For 10,000 years, the humans waited silently, dreaming in a suspended state, unaware that the galaxy continued without them. And for 10,000 years, the galaxy forgot time moved differently for the civilizations that had forced humanity to sleep. Empires rose and fell, wars were fought, and new alliances were formed. Stories of humanity turned into myths, legends told to frighten or inspire. Some said humans had become gods. Others said they had been wiped out. No one remembered the real reason humans had been put to sleep, the one reason that had kept the galaxy safe. The star system where the humans slept drifted quietly at the edge of a remote sector, unnoticed by most travelers. The planet below was barren, the skies filled with strange dust clouds, and the orbital stations above were covered in centuries of cosmic debris. Only a few small civilizations remembered the old tales, and they treated them as cautionary stories rather than truth. Then curiosity found them. A small team of explorers from a minor world stumbled across the star system while mapping uncharted space. They were not warriors or conquerors. They were scientists, eager for discoveries that could make their careers. At first, the discovery seemed ordinary. Strange satellites, unusual readings of energy. But when their scans detected life signs, they froze. Millions of life signs, but all contained within artificial structures. Their instruments could not explain it. "What are these?" One of them whispered. "Maybe it's some long-dead civilization." Another replied, though even they were unsure. "Or something we were never supposed to find." They debated, but curiosity won. The humans had been asleep for 10,000 years. Surely the risk was minimal. Surely awakening a few would be harmless. They began the procedure to open. One of the stasis chambers at first. It seemed simple. The chamber doors opened with a soft hiss, and inside a figure floated, perfectly preserved. The team expected weakness, confusion, or fragility. They expected a being that had been trapped by time itself. But instead, the human inside opened their eyes, calm and clear. There was no fear. There was no confusion. There was only awareness. The team stepped back in shock. The human sat up, as if stretching from a short nap, and looked around. Their eyes were steady, scanning the room with intelligence that felt both ancient and immediate. "Where am I?" the human asked, their voice firm but calm. The scientists stammered, trying to explain, but the human raised a hand, signaling them to pause. They listened. And in that moment, it became clear this was not someone fragile or lost. This was someone who had been preserved for a purpose, someone whose mind and body were built for far more than the galaxy had remembered. As the humans stepped out of the chamber, their movements were precise, controlled, and deliberate. Every action showed discipline and awareness. It was as if 10,000 years of sleep had been nothing more than a pause between chapters. Outside the chamber, the scientists tried to ask questions, but they moved to a nearby console, examining it with curiosity, as if reading old memories written in the machine's code. They began speaking not to the scientists, but to themselves, reconstructing events. The humans had been warriors, explorers, and thinkers unmatched in the galaxy. They had been placed in stasis, not because they had failed, but because their power had frightened every other civilization. They had been kept silent for 10,000 years because no one remembered why humanity had once been feared so greatly. The scientists began to realize their mistake. The humans were not just awake, they were fully aware and fully capable. Their minds worked faster than any machine. In the room, they could reconstruct complex technology, understand strategies and politics that no living civilization had considered, and evaluate threats in ways that no one had imagined. And then the humans spoke again, this time addressing the galaxy through the network the scientists had accidentally connected. Their voice was calm, but every word carried authority. "We have slept. You have forgotten us. You have grown careless. Why have you awakened us?" Panic rippled through the team. They had thought they were making a harmless discovery. They had thought that after 10,000 years, humans could not be dangerous. But danger was the wrong word. Humans were something entirely different. They were not a threat, they were a reckoning. The humans began to ask questions, precise and pointed. They demanded to know the state of the galaxy, which civilizations still ruled, which ones had fallen, and what conflicts had erupted while they slept. They were not satisfied with vague answers. They wanted details, and they wanted them immediately. The scientists tried to comply, but every answer only confirmed their fears. The galaxy had grown messy. Corruption, unchecked wars, and unprepared. Empires had taken the place of the order humans had left behind. Every decision humans made seemed simple to them, but terrifyingly effective to those who had never faced such intelligence in a single day. The humans assessed the galaxy in ways that had taken entire civilizations decades to understand. They could see alliances forming and crumbling, fleets moving and hiding, and the slow erosion of power that left the galaxy vulnerable. And they realized something crucial. The galaxy had awakened them, not because it needed them, but because it had forgotten why it once feared them. Humans had slept for 10,000 years to prevent destruction. They had paused themselves to let the galaxy find balance. And now, the galaxy had failed. In its ignorance, it had awoken a force it could not control. The scientists were terrified, but the humans showed no malice. They were not here to destroy without reason. They were here to restore order, to remind the galaxy of the consequences of forgetting. And as more chambers began to open, more humans began to wake, each one stepping into a world that had moved on without them, but one they were ready to reclaim. Every movement was deliberate, every glance measured. It was clear that these humans had not just survived, they had endured with purpose. And now, fully awake, they were beginning a chapter that the galaxy would never forget. The first humans stepped forward, fully aware of the weight of what they represented. 10,000 years of sleep had not dulled their senses. The galaxy had not prepared for what was coming. And the humans, silent for so long, were ready to speak at last. The first humans had awakened, and the galaxy trembled without fully realizing why. But the story had only just begun. With the first group of humans fully aware, the question arose, what should be done next? Should they be studied, controlled, or left alone? The minor civilizations that had accidentally awakened them could no longer pretend that this was a harmless discovery. At first, the humans observed quietly, absorbing every detail of the galaxy that had changed while they slept. They did not panic or rush, but their eyes were sharp, their minds faster than any of the scientists could follow. They studied the maps, the fleet movements, and the records of political alliances. Each piece of information was carefully processed, stored, and compared to their own memories of the galaxy 10,000 years earlier, the humans were not curious in the way of ordinary explorers. They did not ask idle questions or show wonder at simple technology. Their curiosity was precise. They wanted to understand the state of order, the threats, and the mistakes that had been made. They asked questions that none of the researchers could answer immediately. Names of empires, leaders, and fleets, some forgotten, some grown strong, were requested. Every answer seemed to sharpen their focus, like tools in the hands of a master craftsman. While this was happening, news of the awakening spread. Small fleets that had been monitoring the sector reported the anomaly to larger governments, which in turn called for emergency councils. Many dismissed it at first. How dangerous could humans be after 10,000 years of sleep? Others were not so sure. The ancient stories hinted at power no civilization had seen before, and whispers of, "What if they are still stronger than us?" began to circulate. Meanwhile, the humans were already taking steps to reconnect with their environment. They accessed archives of technology, repaired systems that had long been inactive, and began reconstructing the tools of a civilization that had once spanned 1,000 worlds. They did not hoard this knowledge, they simply assessed it. They studied energy grids, transport networks, and fleets as if reading an old book. Every discovery added to a growing understanding of how the galaxy had shifted and weakened while they slept. The humans also began interacting with the scientists. At first, the communication was cautious. They asked direct questions about why they had been awakened and who had made the decision. The humans' tone was calm, but every word carried weight, and every answer from the scientists seemed to increase the tension in the room. "You should not have woken us," one of the humans said quietly. "But now that you have, we must." "No, why? Why was the warning ignored?" The scientists fumbled. They tried to explain curiosity, exploration, and mistakes made over generations. But the humans listened carefully, weighing every word. They did not react with anger, but there was an unmistakable sense of disappointment. The humans had expected the galaxy to remember, and it had not. They had expected caution, and they had been met with carelessness. It soon became clear that the humans had not awakened merely to exist. They were beginning to evaluate, to judge, and to plan. Small fleets in the sector were observed with precision, their positions and capabilities recorded. Trade routes were analyzed for efficiency and vulnerabilities. Old treaties and alliances were examined to determine which could be leveraged and which were likely to collapse under pressure. Even the scientists realized that the humans were not interested in simple control. They were thinking strategically, like a player seeing an entire board at once, calculating moves centuries ahead. And as more humans emerged from stasis, their presence began to shift the balance of attention in the galaxy. Observers from nearby civilizations approached cautiously, sending signals of peace, curiosity, or caution. Every communication was met with patience and calm, but also with a sense that the humans were quietly measuring and learning. At one point, the humans entered the orbital station's main control room. Screens flickered to life as they accessed records of fleets from multiple civilizations. Each ship was mapped, its power assessed, and its potential threats calculated. It took hours, but the humans completed the task with ease. They had no need for panic or haste. They were patient, methodical, and efficient. The humans were not reckless. They were awake, and every move they made reflected their purpose. The scientists observing this began to realize something terrifying. These humans had been preserved not because they were weak, but because they were strong, and their strength had not diminished in sleep. On the contrary, it had been conserved, like a seed waiting for the right season to grow. The humans were no longer myth, they were reality. And reality had returned with awareness, discipline, and purpose. Then came the first true test. A neighboring civilization, having heard reports of the humans' awakening, sent a small diplomatic vessel. Its captain intended to assess the situation, perhaps negotiate, or at least assert authority. But when the ship arrived and the humans made contact, the diplomat was stunned. The humans did not make demands, nor did they show fear. They asked questions, they analyzed, and they revealed an understanding far beyond what the diplomat had imagined. "You claim control over this sector," one human said calmly, "yet your fleets move in patterns that reveal hesitation and lack of coordination. Your alliances are fragile. Do you not see the risk to yourselves?" The diplomat, unsure how to respond, could only nod. Every word the human spoke reflected knowledge, strategy, and clarity. There was no threat in their tone, yet every message carried authority. The humans were not aggressive. They were observant, critical, and awake. Word of this encounter spread quickly. Other civilizations began to watch more closely. The humans had not yet taken action, yet their mere presence began to alter decisions, change alliances, and force leaders to reconsider their strategies. The galaxy realized that these were not ordinary humans. They were a force of history, intellect, and discipline, awakened after 10,000 years. Meanwhile, more humans emerged from stasis. Each one brought a new layer of understanding. Together, they reconstructed what had been lost, evaluated what had been broken, and began to see the opportunities and threats in the galaxy. Their minds worked like a network, sharing insights without confusion, acting as if time had not passed at all. For the scientists and the minor civilizations that had discovered them, the experience was overwhelming. They had thought awakening. A few humans would be safe. Now they realized that the galaxy had underestimated them entirely. The humans were not just alive. They were awake, aware, and fully capable of understanding the entire system in ways no other civilization could dot. As the humans continued their observations, it became clear that they were not interested in revenge. They did not attack fleets or demand tribute. They were not seeking power in the way the galaxy understood it. Instead, they were assessing, analyzing, and preparing. Their aim was simple: to understand the state of the galaxy and to determine whether it could be protected or if it needed correction. In the quiet moments, the humans even reflected on their own history. They remembered their mistakes, the wars fought, the power wielded, and the decision to sleep. They had paused their existence not out of weakness, but out of wisdom. And now, awakened in a galaxy that had forgotten, they were ready to act once more, but with patience, precision, and purpose. By the end of the first month, the humans had formed a clear understanding of their surroundings. The galaxy had changed, but it had also made mistakes. Political systems were fragile, fleets were mismanaged, and threats from deep space were ignored. The humans had no illusions about the dangers. They had not slept for 10,000 years to be careless now. The galaxy had awakened them without reason, and in doing so, it had set the stage for something entirely new. The humans were no longer myths, no longer stories whispered in fear. They were awake, aware, and ready. And the galaxy would soon understand that 10,000 years of sleep had only made them more precise, more disciplined, and far more capable than any civilization could have imagined. The humans had spent weeks observing, analyzing, and understanding the galaxy. They had learned which civilizations were strong, which were weak, and which were walking a fine line between survival and collapse. But observation alone was no longer enough. They needed to act carefully, subtly, to understand the reactions of the galaxy. Their first steps were quiet. They did not launch fleets or make demands. Instead, they began testing communication channels, sending messages disguised as ordinary transmissions to neighboring systems. The messages were simple, almost casual questions about trade, technology, and alliances. But every question was designed to reveal the intentions, priorities, and weaknesses of those who received them. For the civilizations receiving these transmissions, it was like looking at a mirror they did not understand. The humans' questions were so precise, so revealing, that they forced leaders to reveal more than they intended. A fleet commander might boast of strength, only for the humans to identify gaps in coordination. A diplomat might hide a weakness, only for the humans to detect it in the tone of the message. Every reply became part of a map, not just of territory, but of character and strategy. Meanwhile, the humans began exploring more of the star system they had been placed in. The stasis facilities were vast, containing resources and technology, beyond what even advanced civilizations had discovered. They repaired old stations, restored power grids, and reactivated dormant fleets. These actions were not aggressive, they were practical, ensuring that humanity had the tools needed to understand and influence the galaxy if required. In their quiet diligence, they discovered something extraordinary. Some of the technology left behind by earlier humans was not fully understood by the galaxy. Machines capable of controlling vast energy flows, ships that could traverse long distances in days rather than years, and weapons so precise that they could disable without destruction. These discoveries were noted carefully, catalogued, and studied. The humans were not using them yet, but the galaxy would soon understand that even dormant, humanity's legacy was unmatched. The first direct encounter came unexpectedly. A small diplomatic fleet from a mid-level civilization entered the system, ostensibly to greet the humans and establish contact. But the humans had already prepared. They did not hide or show fear. Instead, they waited, observing the approach, analyzing the fleet's formation, reading the intentions behind every movement. When the fleet's captain requested a meeting, the humans agreed. They did not move with haste or arrogance, but their presence alone conveyed something powerful. They were fully aware, fully capable, and fully human, not myths, not stories, but real and present. You have been asleep for 10,000 years, the fleet captain said, attempting to sound confident. And yet the galaxy believes you are a threat. Why should we not attack you before you become powerful? The humans looked calmly at the captain. We do not seek conflict, one said. We are not here to take what belongs to others. But we will not ignore mistakes. If the galaxy cannot govern itself responsibly, we will correct the course. That is not a threat, it is necessity. The captain had expected arrogance or fear, but found neither. Instead, there was clarity, intelligence, and a quiet authority that unsettled him. He realized that these humans were not like any civilization he had encountered. They were disciplined, aware, and capable of seeing outcomes generations ahead. Over the following weeks, the humans conducted small, deliberate tests. They adjusted the orbit of a minor station and observed how nearby fleets responded. They rerouted energy flows in a communication grid and measured the reactions. Every action was subtle, carefully controlled, and designed to reveal the true state of the galaxy. What they discovered was both troubling and enlightening. Many civilizations had grown complacent. Leaders had become corrupt, fleets mismanaged, and alliances fragile. The galaxy had forgotten caution, and in doing so, it had become vulnerable. Natural threats, from unknown cosmic phenomena to hidden enemies, had grown unchecked because no one was paying attention. The humans' observations were not just strategic, they were human-centric. They studied the decisions of leaders, the motivations of scientists, the actions of diplomats. They saw where pride, fear, or ignorance influenced decisions. They learned about trust, betrayal, and ambition, not in abstract terms, but in the real ways that shape civilizations. At times, the humans even visited planets. They did not conquer, but they walked among people, observing technology, culture, and behavior. They asked questions, sometimes simple, sometimes complex, that forced communities to think more deeply about their choices. Children stared in awe at their presence, not because the humans were strange, but because they carried an aura of knowledge and calm certainty that inspired respect. The first significant ripple occurred when one of these small communities reported the humans' presence to a neighboring system. That system, having heard only myths about humans, assumed the worst. They prepared defenses, called fleets to readiness, and watched the sector closely. The humans noticed immediately. They did not retaliate, but they recorded every action, every hesitation, every miscalculation. Through these careful tests, the humans began to understand the new reality of the galaxy. It was not the one they had left 10,000 years ago. Empires had fallen, new powers had risen, and old alliances had crumbled. But while the galaxy had changed, some things remained: ambition, fear, hope, and conflict. Humans had seen these traits before, and they now saw them clearly again. The humans were not idle. While observing and testing, they began to prepare subtle corrections. They fixed outdated navigation systems that could lead to accidents. They rerouted energy flows in dangerous regions. They repaired small fleets, making them more efficient and reliable. These actions were invisible to most civilizations, but not to the humans. Every small improvement reduced risk, increased stability, and gave the galaxy a chance to survive. And yet, the humans were not satisfied with mere repair. They wanted to understand the potential for cooperation. They sent messages disguised as ordinary communications to multiple civilizations, testing who would respond honestly, who would conceal information, and who would act selfishly. Every response added to their growing map of the galaxy, a network of knowledge that spanned not just stars, but the intentions of those who lived among them. One day, a major civilization attempted to intimidate the humans, sending a message, demanding that they leave the sector immediately. It was the first real challenge to their presence. The humans replied calmly, not with threats, but with facts and reasoning. They pointed out weaknesses, inefficiencies, and errors in the opponent's logic, showing that confrontation would not serve anyone's interest. The message was firm, intelligent, and unyielding. The civilization withdrew, but the message had spread. Others watched carefully, realizing that humans were not easily swayed. They did not bluff, they did not panic, and they did not act without purpose. Every action was measured, every word considered, and every decision reflected knowledge that had been preserved for 10,000 years. It was becoming clear that the humans were not just observers. They were guardians in a way the galaxy had not anticipated. They had slept to protect the galaxy from themselves, and now, fully awake, they were assessing whether the galaxy could protect itself. They were not yet enforcing rules, but their presence alone was already changing behavior. The end of the third month, humans had fully mapped the sector. They had restored essential systems, tested fleets, and evaluated responses from nearby civilizations. They had discovered allies who acted with integrity and others who acted out of fear or ambition. They had seen mistakes that could lead to disaster and successes that could inspire hope. And in all of this, they remained calm. They did not celebrate, they did not boast, and they did not show anger. Their purpose was clear: to understand, to observe, and to prepare. The galaxy had awakened them without reason, but the humans were determined to act with reason, precision, and patience. The subtle shifts they caused were enough to make the galaxy notice. Fleets moved more cautiously, alliances were reconsidered, and leaders began to realize that the humans were not myths or relics. They were alive, aware, and capable of influencing outcomes far beyond what anyone had imagined. And yet, the humans did not seek glory or recognition. They were awake, but they were focused. Every action was deliberate. Every observation added to their understanding. The galaxy was no longer a passive place. It was a complex network of intentions, ambitions, and vulnerabilities, and the humans were ready to navigate it with a clarity that no civilization had seen before. By the end of Part 3, it was clear that the galaxy had changed, but the humans were already several steps ahead. They had tested reactions, observed weaknesses, and quietly begun restoring order where it had been lost. The stage was set for larger actions, for decisions that would shape the galaxy in ways that few could predict. Humans had awakened, not with aggression, but with awareness. And the galaxy, still unprepared, was about to understand the full extent of what it had forgotten. The humans had spent months quietly observing, testing, and understanding the galaxy. They had studied fleets, political systems, and alliances, but now they knew it was time to take more decisive steps. Observation alone would not prepare the galaxy for the threats it faced. They had to act. The first move was subtle, almost invisible. They repaired a series of old communication relays in a neighboring star system, equipment that had been dormant for centuries. This restored faster and more secure communication across multiple civilizations, something that had been impossible due to neglect or mismanagement. It seemed small, but the humans knew the impact would be far-reaching. Soon after, they adjusted navigation routes in several trade corridors. These routes had become dangerous over time, with outdated mapping and hidden hazards. By correcting these paths, humans prevented potential accidents, smuggling routes, and ambushes that could have led to unnecessary conflict. To most, it appeared as if the galaxy had merely been lucky. To the humans, it was careful planning, but humans were not just interested in logistics. They were focused on the people themselves. They began to assess leadership, observing who was responsible, who was corrupt, and who could be trusted. Instead of attacking or interfering openly, they sent indirect messages, testing responses to ethical questions and hypothetical scenarios. Leaders who were honest, capable, and forward-thinking responded thoughtfully. Leaders driven by pride, fear, or greed made mistakes that the humans quietly recorded. This quiet correction and observation soon attracted attention. Neighboring systems noticed improvements in trade routes, fewer accidents in fleets, and better coordination between colonies. Some civilizations speculated on the cause, some feared intervention, but none understood the full truth. The humans had returned not to conquer, but to stabilize, and their method was deliberate and invisible. However, not everyone welcomed their presence. A powerful federation in the sector viewed these actions as a threat. Their fleets were strong, and their leaders proud. They did not understand that the humans did not move recklessly. They interpreted efficiency as ambition and careful planning as preparation for war. Tensions began to rise. The humans noticed immediately. They did not panic or act hastily. Instead, they sent controlled messages, clarifying intentions while subtly pointing out errors and weaknesses in the Federation's fleet coordination and resource management. Their words were calm, logical, and precise. They revealed no anger, but their authority was undeniable. The Federation was unsettled. Their diplomats debated whether the humans were dangerous or simply benevolent observers. Some suggested confrontation. Others suggested negotiation. Every action taken by the humans seemed to force reconsideration, shifting the balance of power without a single weapon fired. Meanwhile, humans began connecting with smaller, less powerful civilizations. These worlds had struggled for independence, resources, and protection for centuries. The humans helped discreetly, repairing infrastructure, providing guidance on resource management, and improving fleet efficiency. To the people on these worlds, it felt like an unseen hand guiding them to stability. They did not know the full extent of humanity's power or the centuries of knowledge they carried. The humans were careful to avoid favoritism or creating dependency. Every action was a lesson, every improvement designed to teach resilience, self-reliance, and cooperation. In some ways, they acted like gardeners, tending to a wild, overgrown garden to bring order without overwhelming the natural growth of each civilization. But even as they focused on stability, humans remained vigilant. Hidden threats lurked in the galaxy pirates, rogue fleets, and unknown dangers that had grown while humans slept. They began mapping these risks, cataloging potential hazards, and preparing contingency plans. Every scenario was considered, every possibility analyzed. The humans were not reckless or aggressive. They were ready for the unknown. One day, a small mining colony sent an emergency signal. A rogue fleet had attempted to seize resources, threatening innocent lives. The humans acted swiftly, sending a small contingent to intervene. They did not attack recklessly. Instead, they outmaneuvered the fleet, disabling its engines and communications without destroying lives or property. The miners were stunned. They had expected disaster, but the humans acted with precision, control, and mercy. News of the humans' actions spread quickly. Neighboring civilizations watched closely, realizing that these beings were unlike any they had seen. They were powerful, yes, but their actions were measured, deliberate, and humane. This created a mix of fear and respect across the sector. The humans also began direct diplomacy, but in ways that were unfamiliar to most. Instead of demanding allegiance, they asked questions, listened, and offered guidance. They encouraged collaboration between civilizations that had fought for centuries, pointing out mutual benefits, risks, and long-term consequences. Their presence alone began reshaping alliances and encouraging peace where there had been conflict. Some leaders were skeptical. They believed the humans had a hidden agenda, that their guidance was a form of subtle domination. The humans did not argue. They continued their work, quietly demonstrating that their interest was stability, not conquest. The galaxy slowly began to see that humans had awakened with a purpose far greater than mere power. Even as they worked to stabilize the galaxy, humans prepared for the worst. They knew that not all civilizations would cooperate willingly. Some would resist, some would misinterpret their actions, and some might even attempt aggression. Humans considered every possibility, developed strategies, and trained themselves and their small forces to respond efficiently without unnecessary violence. This combination of calm authority, careful planning, and readiness was unlike anything the galaxy had experienced. Civilizations that had once relied on brute strength or intimidation began to reconsider their methods. Leadership, strategy, and collaboration became more valuable than fear or force. At the same time, humans continued exploring their own origins. They accessed archives, piecing together the history of the galaxy while they slept. They learned about empires that had risen and fallen, wars that had been forgotten, and mistakes that had led to instability. Every piece of information helped them understand not just the galaxy, but the people who lived in it. Their approach was always human-centered. They studied behavior, ethics, and decision-making, recognizing that the galaxy's greatest challenges were not just technical, but personal. Greed, fear, ambition, and pride shaped choices more than power or technology. The humans understood this deeply because they had once been governed by the same flaws. As the fourth month progressed, the humans began forming networks of communication between worlds. They did not impose control, but they facilitated connections, encouraging cooperation where possible. Their efforts were subtle, often invisible, but effective. Trade routes became safer, fleets coordinated better, and conflicts that might have escalated were quietly escalated. Not all civilizations approved. Some continued to view humans with suspicion, sending fleets to monitor them, or attempting to intimidate smaller worlds under their influence. The humans observed these actions calmly, noting mistakes and weaknesses, and allowed each civilization to reveal its true character. Their patience was a tool as powerful as any weapon. By the end of Part 4, the humans had achieved something remarkable. They had begun to stabilize a galaxy that had fallen into chaos. They had intervened discreetly, improved communication, repaired technology, and influenced diplomacy without firing a single shot. Their presence alone had changed behavior, forced reconsideration, and encouraged cooperation. The galaxy had awakened humanity without reason, but the humans had acted with purpose. They were no longer myths, no longer stories of a forgotten past. They were awake, aware, and ready to guide the galaxy toward a future that was safer, stronger, and more connected. Even as their subtle influence spread, humans remained vigilant. Hidden threats, internal corruption, and rogue fleets continued to exist. The work was far from over. But one thing was certain. The galaxy had underestimated humanity, and the moment it had forgotten why it once feared them, the humans had quietly returned to take responsibility. By the end of these months, the stage was set for more visible actions. The galaxy could no longer ignore humans, and every civilization, from the smallest colony to the largest empire, was about to understand that 10,000 years of sleep had not diminished their abilities, their intelligence, or their purpose. Humans had awakened, not for war, not for conquest, but for correction, protection, and guidance. And the galaxy, unprepared, was beginning to feel the full impact of their return. Months had passed since the humans first awakened. The galaxy had begun to feel the subtle influence of their presence. Communication between worlds had improved, trade routes had become safer, and conflicts that might have escalated were quietly diffused. But the humans' new observation and subtle action could only go so far. Now it was time for more visible interventions. The first direct action was carefully calculated. A rogue fleet had been terrorizing a series of small colonies, stealing resources and leaving destruction in its wake. The humans had been watching quietly, observing patterns, studying the fleet's tactics, and calculating the most effective response. When the moment was right, they moved. Unlike most civilizations, humans did not rush blindly into battle. They approached strategically. Using precise maneuvers, they disabled the fleet's engines and communications without destroying the ships. The crews were captured unharmed, and their weapons were rendered useless. The colonies were saved, and the fleet's ability to threaten others was neutralized permanently. The news spread quickly. Neighboring civilizations were stunned. The humans had acted decisively, but with restraint. They had not sought revenge or domination. They had solved the problem efficiently and humanely. For the first time, many leaders began to understand the difference between raw power and intelligence, between fear and calculated influence. Humans then focused on diplomacy. They reached out to several mid-level civilizations, offering guidance on alliances and cooperation, but they did not dictate terms. Instead, they presented clear analysis of the risks and benefits of cooperation, showing how collaboration could prevent wars, stabilize trade, and strengthen defenses. Their approach was unusual. Rather than commanding, they taught. Rather than forcing, they persuaded. Some civilizations resisted. They feared the humans' power, their knowledge, and their authority. But the humans did not push. They allowed hesitation to reveal character. Those who acted with wisdom and openness were rewarded with support and guidance. Those who acted with arrogance or deception were left to their own devices, observed quietly until they either corrected their mistakes or revealed their true nature. Meanwhile, humans began to address long-standing issues that had weakened the galaxy during their absence. Corruption in trade networks, poorly managed fleets, and outdated planetary defenses were all improved. Humans repaired infrastructure, updated communication systems, and provided strategic guidance without claiming ownership or authority. Each action was designed to teach civilizations to be self-sufficient and resilient. The humans also worked to uncover hidden threats. They scanned remote sectors for rogue fleets, unchecked pirates, and natural dangers that had grown while the galaxy slept. Every anomaly was documented, assessed, and neutralized if necessary. The humans did not act for glory. They acted to prevent disaster and protect life. Their actions were not unnoticed. Some civilizations, especially those that had underestimated humans, began to reconsider their positions. Fleets were reorganized, alliances strengthened, and leaders who had acted recklessly found themselves challenged by the humans' strategic insight. The presence of humans alone encouraged better decision-making, as if the galaxy had been reminded of what discipline and foresight looked like. One of the most important steps humans took was addressing old rivalries that had persisted for centuries. Some civilizations had been locked in endless disputes, wasting resources and risking war. Humans intervened by facilitating communication, presenting logical outcomes of continued conflict, and demonstrating alternatives. The results were subtle, but powerful. For the first time in decades, some rival civilizations began negotiating peace rather than preparing for battle. At the same time, humans began preparing their own fleets, not for conquest, but as a precaution. Every ship was upgraded with efficient engines, precise weapons, and advanced defenses. These fleets were small compared to some empires, but they were unmatched in strategy, coordination, and adaptability. Humans were not seeking war. They were creating a force capable of responding to threats with speed and intelligence. As they strengthened their presence, humans also addressed technological stagnation. Many civilizations had grown complacent, relying on outdated tools and methods. Humans shared knowledge selectively, offering insights that allowed others to innovate without dependence. They taught the value of adaptability, creativity, and foresight. Civilizations that embraced these lessons began to grow stronger, while those that ignored them found themselves increasingly vulnerable. A turning point came when a major conflict threatened to erupt between two powerful empires. Both sides had mobilized fleets, prepared for battle, and refused to negotiate. Humans intervened, but not with weapons. Instead, they presented a comprehensive analysis of the situation. Fleet strengths, weaknesses, probable outcomes, and long-term consequences of continued conflict. They proposed alternatives that allowed both sides to save face while preventing war. The result was remarkable. The conflict was avoided, not through intimidation or force, but through intelligence, foresight, and clear communication. The galaxy began to see humans in a new light. They were not conquerors, they were problem solvers, mediators, and strategists who acted with reason, not impulse. Despite their successes, humans remained vigilant. They knew that not all threats could be predicted. Hidden enemies, natural disasters, and misjudgments still posed risks. Every action, every decision was made with consideration of multiple scenarios. The humans had learned patience and precision over centuries, and they applied it relentlessly. Humans also encouraged collaboration between civilizations that had rarely interacted. They facilitated trade agreements, defensive pacts, and scientific research partnerships. These initiatives strengthened the galaxy, creating networks of support and cooperation that had been missing for millennia. The humans did not demand loyalty. They encouraged it through example and insight. One of the most impressive aspects of their intervention was the way humans balanced power. They did not empower one civilization over another. Instead, they distributed guidance, technology, and strategic insight in a way that leveled the playing field. Civilizations that had been neglected or oppressed found opportunities to grow and defend themselves. Those that had grown arrogant and careless were reminded of the consequences of poor leadership. The humans' influence extended beyond immediate strategy and technology. They also focused on culture and ethics. They encouraged civilizations to value wisdom, foresight, and cooperation over fear, greed, and aggression. They reminded leaders that survival depended not just on fleets and weapons, but on understanding, empathy, and careful planning. As their presence became more pronounced, humans faced challenges. Some civilizations resisted, sending fleets to observe, intimidate, or even threaten. Humans responded with intelligence, not aggression. They demonstrated capabilities without destruction, showing that strength was not measured by violence, but by control, precision, and foresight. Their actions created a ripple effect. Fleets were better managed, leaders acted more responsibly, and conflicts were prevented before they began. Trade routes became safer, alliances more stable, and colonies more secure. The galaxy was changing, quietly but profoundly, under the careful influence of humans who had awakened from 10,000 years of sleep. Even as they worked, humans remained humble. They did not seek praise or recognition. Their goal was simple: to correct mistakes, stabilize civilizations, and prepare for challenges that the galaxy might face. They acted with the understanding that their return was not for personal gain, but for the survival and growth of countless civilizations. By the end of Part 5, humans had achieved a remarkable balance. They had intervened decisively where necessary, guided leaders toward better choices, prevented disasters, and strengthened cooperation across the galaxy. Their presence was now impossible to ignore, yet they remained patient, strategic, and human-centric in every decision. The galaxy had awakened humanity without reason, but humans had responded with wisdom. They had moved from observation to subtle action, and now to direct intervention. Every step demonstrated intelligence, foresight, and care. Civilizations began to see that these humans were not myths or stories. They were awake, aware, and capable of shaping the future. The stage was set for the final chapter. Humans had prepared, guided, and stabilized. The galaxy had felt the first ripples of their presence, and soon the full extent of their awakening would be revealed. As civilizations finally understood what it meant to underestimate humanity. By the time the humans reached the final phase of their return, the galaxy had begun to feel a shift. Civilizations that had once relied on fear, aggression, and luck were slowly recognizing that intelligence, strategy, and cooperation mattered more than ever. The humans had worked quietly, subtly, and with patience, and now their presence was undeniable. It was time to show the galaxy the full extent of what humanity had become. The humans did not rush into dominance. They had no desire for conquest, no wish to rule by fear. Their power was not for destruction, it was for correction, protection, and guidance. But they had learned that subtlety alone was no longer enough. The galaxy had to understand that 10,000 years of sleep had not dulled humanity's ability. It had sharpened it. The first display of their strategic presence came when a rogue coalition of fleets attempted to seize control of a star system. These fleets were powerful, well-coordinated, and confident. They had grown arrogant in the absence of humans. When they entered the system, they found humans already prepared. Fleet movements were anticipated, communication disrupted, and escape routes blocked not through brute force, but through superior strategy and precision. The humans disabled the coalition ships without unnecessary destruction, showing a mastery of tactics and efficiency that left the leaders stunned. The fleets could no longer threaten the colonies, and the humans left the crews unharmed. It was a demonstration of power and restraint, showing the galaxy that intelligence and discipline were stronger than sheer aggression. Word of this encounter spread like wildfire. Other civilizations watched closely, realizing that humans were capable of actions that went far beyond what they had imagined. Stories that had been myths for millennia suddenly became real, and the fear that humans could dominate was replaced by respect for their intelligence, ethics, and precision. Humans then moved to address the fractured political structures that had caused instability for centuries. They began facilitating negotiations between rival empires, not by dictating terms, but by presenting comprehensive analyses of risks, benefits, and long-term consequences. They showed leaders that collaboration was often the best path to survival. In many cases, these negotiations resulted in treaties and alliances that had been impossible for centuries. Meanwhile, humans continued to strengthen smaller civilizations, those that had been neglected, exploited, or overlooked. They shared insights on resource management, defense, and technology, but always with a focus on independence. No civilization became dependent on humans. Instead, they became more capable, resilient, and strategic. The galaxy began to see the humans not just as powerful, but as teachers, mentors, and guides. Hidden threats, however, remained a concern. Unknown fleets, pirates, and natural dangers could strike at any time. Humans established monitoring networks, observing every movement. With care and precision, they could respond instantly to any danger, but they did so only when necessary. Their goal was stability, not fear, and their actions reflected this clearly. Civilizations that had once relied on intimidation began to rethink their strategies. Leaders realized that aggression alone was no longer enough to secure power. Intelligence, foresight, and collaboration mattered far more than they had understood. Humans were not punishing them. They were showing them a new path forward, one where strategy and ethics replaced chaos and fear. As humans became more visible, they began to coordinate major initiatives across the galaxy. Trade routes were optimized, fleets were organized, for defense and research programs flourished under guidance. Information sharing between civilizations increased, reducing misunderstandings, inefficiency, and mismanagement. Humanity's influence was subtle but profound, reshaping the galaxy without imposing dominance. The humans also began to address the most entrenched conflicts. Wars that had lasted for decades were brought to the negotiation table. Leaders were presented with alternative outcomes, demonstrating how cooperation could prevent destruction while achieving goals. In every case, the humans acted not as enforcers, but as mediators with unmatched insight. One of the most important lessons humans imparted was the value of perspective. They reminded civilizations that immediate gains often came at long-term costs. Leaders who had acted recklessly began to see the consequences of poor planning. Those who had relied on intimidation learned that true strength lay in preparation, patience, and understanding. Even as humans strengthened civilizations, they prepared for the possibility of direct conflict. Their fleets were unmatched in coordination and strategy. Every ship, every system, and every action was carefully calculated. They could overwhelm any force if necessary, but they used this capability sparingly, only when absolutely required. Their presence alone acted as a deterrent to reckless aggression, the culmination of humanity's influence came when a coalition of empires, fearful of the humans' growing presence, attempted to assert dominance. They believed they could challenge humans and maintain control. When they mobilized their fleets, the humans were already several steps ahead. Their response was precise, strategic, and controlled. Fleets were neutralized without unnecessary destruction. Communication networks were stabilized, and diplomacy ensured no civilians were harmed. The coalition's leaders were forced to recognize their limitations. For the first time, they understood that humans were not myth, legend, or simple beings. They were aware, disciplined, and capable of reshaping the galaxy through intelligence and strategy alone. Fear turned to respect, and respect turned to cooperation. In the following months, humans continued to stabilize and guide. They encouraged trade, alliances, and research, focusing on long-term prosperity rather than short-term gain. Civilizations that had once fought for dominance began working together. The galaxy, once fragmented and chaotic, started to show signs of balance, resilience, and foresight. Humans also remained vigilant about the natural universe. Black holes, asteroid fields, and cosmic storms were monitored carefully. Technologies were implemented to protect civilizations from natural disasters, and early warning systems were established. Humanity's return was not just about politics and fleets, it was about survival, safety, and preparedness on a galactic scale. As the years passed, humans became a stabilizing force. They acted not as rulers, but as guides. The galaxy had awakened them without reason, but humans responded with purpose, wisdom, and discipline. They demonstrated that power was not about conquest, but about knowledge, foresight, and care. Even the most skeptical civilizations began to change. Leaders who had doubted humans' intentions started to adopt their methods, planning with foresight, acting with discipline, and considering long-term consequences. A culture of strategic thinking began to spread, and the galaxy slowly became more resilient and united. By the end of this period, humans had achieved something remarkable. They had prevented wars, stabilized civilizations, strengthened alliances, and prepared the galaxy for threats that had once gone unnoticed. Their influence was profound, yet gentle, a reminder that intelligence and care could achieve far more than brute force. The final realization came when humans convened a council of representatives from multiple civilizations. They spoke not as conquerors, but as guides, explaining the importance of balance, foresight, and cooperation. Every word carried weight, not because of fear, but because of clarity, wisdom, and authority born from 10,000 years of experience. And survival. The council understood. The galaxy had underestimated humanity for millennia, but now it had learned a lesson it could not ignore. Humans were not merely survivors. They were guardians, strategists, and catalysts for positive change. Their awakening had been feared, but it became a turning point for civilizations across countless star systems. The humans had returned not for glory or conquest, but to awaken the potential of the galaxy itself. They had demonstrated that knowledge, patience, and intelligence were far stronger than fear, pride, or aggression. The civilizations that embraced this lesson thrived, and those that resisted slowly learned it through the humans' calm and careful guidance. By the time the humans fully established their presence, the galaxy had transformed. Fleets moved with purpose, alliances were strengthened, trade and research flourished, and conflicts were minimized. The influence of humans was not enforced, it was understood. Every civilization recognized that the galaxy had changed forever, and the change had come from beings who had slept for 10,000 years, then awakened with wisdom, discipline, and vision. The humans had returned as a force of clarity, purpose, and guidance. The galaxy had forgotten why it should fear awakening humanity, but the humans had reminded it not through aggression, but through intelligence, foresight, and care. And as they continued to watch over the stars, the civilizations of the galaxy finally understood that humans were not myths. They were awake, aware, and guardians of a future that had once seemed lost.